We have a report coming from our staff. They've been working on it for some time, and it's coming next month, meaning October. And it's beneficial to us to obviously have the results of the same work that was being done in Vancouver at roughly the same time. And it does compare ours and theirs, what's been done in other cities. And so we'll have our own answer to this, but it certainly is helpful to be able to have a chat with Mayor Robertson about it and to see their proposals that are going to their city council. And similarly, we will have proposals and a report in front of our city council sometime in the next month or so to address the issue as it has arisen here.
Mayor Robertson, RE/MAX today is saying that your 15% foreign buyer tax on residential properties are just going to shift the foreign investor into Vancouver's commercial properties. Mm-hmm. Is that necessarily a problem?
Well, the jury's out on whether the BC government's foreign tax is going to have the desired effect. We're watching it very closely. The city has no jurisdiction with that, so there's some growing concern about the impact on commercial property now that investor dollar is now going where there's no 15% tax, and the commercial market may get too hot. We've had a very strong commercial market for many years now, and the biggest boom in office tower development in the downtown in our history. So we've been enjoying success economically, and that's created positive results in the commercial real estate front. We don't want that to overheat, though. So we're watching it closely, and we'll see. We're watching the data on the impact of this 15% tax across the board. And it's too early to tell. The prices are still, but the market has obviously slowed dramatically in the months since that came in.
So it could be a scenario where you can't afford to live in the city, and then businesses can't afford to set up in the city.
Well, yeah, we can't go there. We've seen our market out of control for too long. The intervention from the BC government came very late in the game, and obviously too late with the very high value properties that have been skyrocketing in value. Our concern at City Hall is primarily on more affordable housing and low to middle income families, working families in the city, making sure that they can live and work in Vancouver. Our economy is booming. We're creating tens of thousands of jobs, and we need to be sure people can live and get around in the city to keep the economy successful.
But I think that question betrays a very important understanding of the connection between the two, and that is something that concerns us, because obviously as we want to see our cities creating more and more and more jobs, it's going to become a huge problem if we continue to create jobs, because both cities are very attractive places for people to invest, and the people who are needed to work in those jobs can't afford to live in the city. Mm-hmm. And so there is that connection, and increasingly I'm finding here in Toronto that business leaders are understanding this is not just a social issue. It is a very important economic issue, because they have to have the people to fill those jobs that are being created to work in their enterprises, and they understand that those people have to have an affordable place to live. So the connection is hugely important to us, and it's a connection we're having to make sure everybody understands. It's not just a social issue, it's a huge economic issue as well.
So when it comes to falling glass, obviously there was another incident yesterday. Given that the city's already called on the province to strengthen the building code regulations of 2012, is there anything more that the city can do at this point?
Well, with respect to the particular incident this morning, the latest one, we obviously are employing all the steps we would employ in looking at that individual incident, investigating its circumstances and issuing whatever orders are necessary as it relates to that building. But one thing I have done now, we are advocating, as you suggested, with the province, and we will continue to advocate that they take a look at what needs to be done, perhaps to strengthen provisions in the building code. But I'm also going to convene a meeting in my office between our buildings people and some people from the development and construction industry, because what I'd like to get my head around is the following question. Is this a series of random incidents that are happening, or is there a problem here that is, say, related to glass manufacturing or glass installation or the way in which buildings are being constructed? And so far, it's difficult for somebody like me to draw a connection between all these different incidents, except to say they all have the same result, which is an unsafe circumstance, both for the people who live in the buildings, but also for the people who are, on the streets. And so I'm going to convene that meeting and see what I can learn from that, and that might better inform advocacy with the other governments or with the industry as to what we should do. But bottom line is we can't continue to have this happening. It's disruptive to the city, but much more important than that, it is not safe. It puts people's safety at risk, and we can't have that.
Is there any proactive inspection that could be done? I realize you can examine every single unit.
This is part of the problem. That's why I want to understand, is it something that the experts would say, experts both in the industry but also experts from the city, they believe this is some kind of an industry-wide, problem, in which case with all the towers being built here, similar to Vancouver, that's a much bigger kind of problem than if they think it's been confined to a specific area. I know when it happened a couple of years ago, they said it was because we were having a hot summer. And, the heat was causing certain reaction with the glass, and that doesn't make it any less serious, but it just means, well, at least at that time, that's what was explained to us. So that's why I want to get myself better informed and before we decide sort of, again, who we should ask for what. I just know this. It's not satisfactory and it's not safe to have this going on a repeated basis, even if they are random events. We've got to do we've got to make sure together, and by together I mean the we is the industry, the different levels of government, to make sure people know this is going to be minimized to beyond what it is now.
Mayor Tory, is the province doing enough to tackle the fentanyl crisis in Ontario? I believe Toronto public health workers, your workers, said that they don't have enough real-time data and they're helping to address it.
And it's back to what we've talked about with all of these issues. Housing, where we need information. Falling glass, where we need information. And I would say that we need more information. Whatever we're getting today in terms of both sort of categorizing the problems we have with overdoses, and as you know, one of the reasons why the City Council strongly supported the introduction of supervised injection sites was because we actually had data on the number of people who were dying of drug overdoses on the streets of Toronto, and I think the vast majority of councillors and people in Toronto found that unacceptable. Now we read about something that is moving, as the Mayor Robertson and I discussed, we read about something that is moving from west to east in the country, but we don't know to what extent it is a problem. I can tell you that Mayor Robertson seems to have more precise data on this problem, for example, than we do. And so I would just say, without being critical of anybody, this is something that is a relatively new, phenomenon in the drug, world, and that it is something where the more information we can have, the better we'll be able to discuss with everybody involved what we can do about it. So the answer to the question would be yes.
A couple more questions if there are any.
Mr. Mayor, back to housing for a minute.
Yeah.
Am I wrong, and let me finish the question for you,
No.
that I'm wrong, because I usually am.
Yes. Thank you. Next question. He's the Globe and Mail, so
I'm always wrong. The scale of the problem in Toronto, the billions that Toronto Community Housing needs to fix these units, some of which are being left vacant, I'm bad with the math, but doesn't that dwarf the need in the other cities? There's not a danger that Toronto could gobble up whatever money is made available before anyone else gets a chance at it?
Well, I'm sure the other governments will ensure that doesn't happen. But I will say this, and Councillor Bailão and I have been pretty consistent. We have a different problem here in the sense that Toronto is quite unusually and uniquely responsible by itself for the repair of social housing, and the backlog that has been allowed to build up over a period of years without help from the other governments is very big. It's $2.6 billion, as you know. And we have put forward $900 million of actual, real City of Toronto money to fix what we believe to be our share of that. And so the answer to the question is that we have that need, but then we have a need that is exactly sort of parallel to that of Vancouver, perhaps on a slightly different scale, but same need, which is also for support for the construction of new affordable rental housing and affordable home ownership housing. So you'll see tomorrow that we will outline, when we speak in front of and with the federal and provincial ministers, both of those streams, because while the ownership regime is slightly different in terms of social housing and the responsibility in Vancouver, they have their own set of problems there. Ours is different and bigger, and I'm sure the government will try to take into account, the governments, the magnitude of these problems as they allocate the money. But I don't think Mayor Robertson or the other mayors will allow a situation to arise where we take all the money because our problem is bigger and they end up with nothing. I somehow just don't think.
Leave us with a problem still to solve.
Well, look, we've indicated that what we would like to see is a shared responsibility for this problem. We've always believed that to be appropriate before I got here and since I've been here. And that is that we would say that it's fair, we believe. It's more than fair, I think, given the very accurate revenue kind of source rundown that the Mayor of Vancouver gave, that if we divided a third, and a third, one would suggest that's us taking even more responsibility than our means suggest we can, but we've done it already. We've already put up a third of the repair bill. We're just saying now we need other people to come to the table, the other governments, to help us with this, which is a problem affecting our most vulnerable people and an asset that we own as a population. We own it together. And so that's all we're saying, and I guess those governments will have to decide how they respond, and that's part of what tomorrow's about.
I think, yeah, among big city mayors, we've talked about a needs-based allocation of housing funding. I mean, similar to with transit, we advocated for ridership-based formula so that the transit dollars could go where transit riders are, where we need to increase the service, improve the service, make sure people can get around on transit. Same goes with housing. We have to make sure the housing dollars go where the needs are the highest, where the most vulnerable populations are. It is in the biggest cities, and we have to ensure that that's where we're housing people with those housing dollars federally. And we've made that case as big city mayors to the federal government now. A needs-based formula is what we're calling for, and ensuring that we can make these investments in Canada's big cities.